She spent 32 years behind bars for a crime she did not commit. Mary Virginia Jones was a mother, a teacher's aide, and a woman trapped in an abusive relationship that turned her life into a nightmare. Branded a criminal when she was truly a victim, she lost 3 decades of freedom, yet never lost her faith, her dignity, or her will to survive. Before we dive in, family, make sure you subscribe to Black Journey and hit that bell because I share powerful new stories with you every single day. Now sit back, relax, and let me take you into this amazing story you don't want to miss. In the summer of 1939, in the heart of Georgia, a baby girl named Mary Virginia Jones was born. She was born into a world already shaped by the heavy weight of Jim Crow laws, into a nation where the color of her skin dictated her rights, her chances, and even her dreams. Yet from the beginning, Mary carried with her a light, gentle but strong, that guided her through the trials ahead. Raised in a working-class Black family, she grew up learning the values of resilience, faith, and perseverance. Her childhood was not one of luxury, but of deep family bonds, of shared meals, of church on Sundays, and of lessons passed down through generations that said, no matter what the world throws at you, you endure. By the time Mary was a young woman, in the 1960s the country was changing. The civil rights movement surged through the streets. Voices like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s echoed across television sets and radios. Mary, like many young Black women of her generation, lived with the tension of hope and fear, the promise of new rights colliding with the realities of systemic racism. She built her life carefully, steady as she could. She became a mother, raising children with the same care and strength her own mother had shown her. She worked as a teacher's aide in Los Angeles, giving her time and patience to young students who needed a steady hand and a kind word. By her 40s, Mary was respected in her community, a woman whose faith in God and commitment to her children defined her. But in 1981, everything in Mary's life changed. She was in her early 40s when she met a man named Mo Willis. He came to her like so many troubled souls had before, broken, in need of guidance. Mary had always been someone who believed in helping others, believing that no one was beyond saving. To her, Mose was another man who just needed a chance to live clean, to find a new path. She invited him into her life and into her home, never imagining the storm he would bring. What started as companionship quickly turned into control. He was abusive, volatile, and violent, breaking Mary down with threats and fear. She lived in terror, trapped in a cycle of intimidation, and yet she stayed, not out of love, but because she believed she had no choice. Leaving him meant risking her life and the safety of her children. One night in 1981, Willis forced Mary into the middle of a nightmare that would cost her 3 decades of her freedom. He had kidnapped 2 men, drug dealers, at gunpoint. Mary did not know where he was taking them. She only knew that he had a weapon and that he had threatened her life if she disobeyed. He ordered her to drive, and she did. She drove because a gun was at her side. She drove because she had children who needed her alive. She drove because she knew that this man, the man she had taken into her home, was capable of killing her. They reached a dark alley. Mose pulled the 2 men out of the car and forced them down. Then, in front of Mary, he opened fire. 2 shots cracked into the night. One man survived, gravely injured. The other died on the cold ground. Mary ran from the scene, desperate, terrified, and broken, but it was too late. The police would soon come, and her life would never be the same. When the case reached the courts, the system did not see Mary as a victim. They did not see a woman, forced to comply at gunpoint, a woman living under abuse. They did not see a mother trying to protect herself and her children from a violent man. Instead, the system saw her as an accomplice, as if she had been equal in this crime. In 1982, she stood before a judge and jury, not as a battered woman but as a criminal. Prosecutors painted her as complicit. The jury, without the benefit of testimony about intimate partner violence, convicted her of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and robbery. The sentence was harsh and final: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mary was 43, years old when the prison doors closed behind her. Life behind bars was a world apart, a place designed to strip away identity and hope. But Mary refused to let it consume her. She carried her faith with her, the same faith that had sustained her as a child in Georgia, as a young mother in Los Angeles, as a victim in an abusive relationship. In prison, she became known as Mother Mary. She led Bible studies. She comforted women who had lost hope. And she reminded others that dignity could never be taken by walls and steel bars. She created a family inside, one that reflected her own compassion. Even in her confinement, she gave love freely, becoming a spiritual anchor for countless women who served alongside her. But 32 years is a long time. 32 years meant watching her children grow up without her, missing birthdays, graduations, weddings, and births. 32 years meant being there in letters and phone calls, but never being able to hold them, never being able to sit across from them at a family table. Her daughter, Denitra, carried the pain of her mother's absence like a wound. Yet she also carried her mother's strength, fighting for her freedom year after year. Together, though separated, they prayed and hoped for justice that seemed impossible. By the early 2000s, society had changed. Understanding of domestic violence had grown. What had once been dismissed as private matters was now recognized as cycles of control, manipulation, and terror. Lawyers, advocates, and law students began to look back at old cases with new eyes, realizing how many women had been imprisoned not as criminals, but as victims punished for their survival. Among these advocates were law students from the University of Southern California's Post-Conviction Justice Project. They took Mary's case, poring through the details, understanding what had been ignored at her trial. They saw her for who she truly was, not a cold-blooded criminal, but a woman whose life had been stolen by both an abuser and a system blind to her suffering. And in 2014, after more than 3 decades behind bars, the moment came when the world would finally hear her truth. At 74 years old, Mary Virginia Jones stood before a judge once again. This time the courtroom was different. This time there was a new understanding of domestic violence, of coercion, of what it means to live under the constant shadow of abuse. With her lawyers by her side, her daughter in the gallery, and her faith steady as ever, Mary waited for the decision that would determine the rest of her life. The air in that Los Angeles courtroom was heavy with years of waiting. Mary Virginia Jones had spent nearly half her life locked away, and now, at 74, her frail frame carried not just her own suffering, but the weight of every woman, silenced by violence and ignored by the courts. The judge listened as her lawyers explained how, back in 1982, the jury had never been told about the abuse. They had never heard what it meant to live under constant threat, how the mind bends and breaks when survival depends on obedience. They had never been given the chance to see her as a victim. Instead, they had been given only a caricature of complicity. The decision came down on March 24, 2014. The judge overturned her conviction. After 32 long years, Mary was finally free. She stood quietly, her eyes glistening with tears that refused to fall. Her daughter Denitra rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around the mother she had been forced to visit in prison for most of her life. That hug was not just an embrace, it was the reclaiming of stolen time. "We've got a lot of Mother's Days to catch up on," Denitra said softly, her voice breaking with joy. Outside the courthouse, friends, family, and supporters cried, openly. Strangers who had followed her case clapped their hands and raised their voices, not just in celebration of Mary's freedom, but in recognition of her dignity. Reporters asked Mary how she felt after spending 3 decades behind bars for a crime she did not commit. She spoke slowly, her voice calm, carrying the strength of a woman who had endured the unendurable. "I don't have a reason to be bitter," she said. "God is my shepherd. He brought me this far." It was a statement of grace, not denial, of the pain, but a choice to rise above it. She refused to let the system or her abuser define her story. Her story would be one of faith and resilience, not despair. Yet freedom was not simple. Mary walked out of the Century Regional Detention Facility with no money, no home of her own, and no plan other than to start again. For most, 74 is an age of rest, of rocking chairs and grandchildren, of long afternoons telling family stories. For Mary, 74 was a new beginning. The world she stepped into was not the same one she had left in 1982. Technology had transformed everyday life. Cell phones, the internet, even the way people communicated, it all felt foreign. She had to relearn the basics, from how to use a debit card to how to cross a city that had become unrecognizable in 32 years. But Mary was never a woman to complain. She moved forward quietly, with gratitude for each step she could take, in freedom. Her faith community embraced her, and her daughter never left her side. Together they pieced together a new life. Denitra guided her mother gently, showing her how to navigate a world of smartphones and social media, while Mary taught her daughter the deeper lessons of forgiveness and survival. The two women became symbols of resilience, not only mother and daughter reunited, but survivors of injustice who refused to be broken. Mary's story echoed far beyond Los Angeles. It became a cautionary tale about a justice system that too often failed to see Black women as victims, about a society that criminalized survival instead of understanding it. Advocates pointed to her case as an example of why intimate partner battering must be taken seriously in the courts, why women trapped in abusive relationships deserve protection, not punishment. For Black women in particular, whose pain had historically been dismissed or minimized, Mary's case was a mirror of systemic failure and the urgent need for reform. For Mary, however, the work was not political. It was personal. She lived her days with quiet determination, attending church, spending time with her family, and continuing to offer spiritual guidance to those who needed it. She never saw herself as a victim, though the world had every reason to call her one. Instead, she carried herself as a teacher, a mother, and a woman of faith. Mother Mary, as she had been known inside prison, remained the name she carried outside too, a sign that even behind bars, she had never stopped nurturing others. Her journey also spoke to the resilience of countless women who endure violence, in silence, whose voices are stifled by fear and disbelief. Mary's survival reminded people that courage does not always look like escape. Sometimes courage is simply staying alive through unimaginable terror. Sometimes courage is enduring when the world refuses to see your suffering. And sometimes, courage is walking free after 32 years, not with bitterness but with forgiveness. As the years passed after her release, Mary slowly rebuilt the life that had been stolen. She became a living testament to what justice delayed looks like, and how dignity can survive even the harshest conditions. She never sought revenge against the system that had wronged her. She did not spend her days in anger. Instead, she carried herself with quiet pride, showing that freedom is not only a condition of the body, but also of the spirit. Looking back at her life, the trajectory is heartbreaking, yet inspiring. Born in the segregated South of the 1930s, Mary grew up in a world stacked against her. In her 40s, she became entangled with a man who used her kindness against her, pulling her into a crime that shattered her life. In her 70s, she emerged from prison not as a broken woman, but as a living witness to faith and perseverance. Her story is one of tragedy, yes, but also of triumph. The triumph of holding on to one's humanity when everything else is stripped away. For the Black community, her story stands as both a warning and a source of pride, a warning of how easily the justice system can fail, how quickly it can turn victims into criminals, and how long it can take to correct its mistakes, but also a source of pride, because Mary's dignity and resilience embody the survival of a people who have endured centuries of injustice. She is a reminder that even when the system denies your humanity, you can still claim it for yourself. In the end, the story of Mary Virginia Jones is not just about one woman's suffering. It is about the broader struggle for justice, the fight to be seen and heard, the courage to survive abuse, and the determination to live free. It is about the enduring power of faith, the unbreakable bond between mother and child, and the possibility of redemption even after decades of loss. Her life is a testimony that the human spirit, when anchored in dignity and love, can withstand even the harshest storms. Mary passed her days after prison with gratitude, surrounded by the family and community she had been denied for so long. She remained a beacon to those who knew her, a woman who endured the unimaginable and came out whole. Her story continues to be told not just because of the injustice she suffered, but because of the way she carried herself through it. With courage, with grace, and with the quiet strength of someone who refused to let the darkness define her. And so the name Mary Virginia Jones lives on, not as a statistic, not as another case in the archives of injustice, but as a story of survival, of resilience, and of the unyielding dignity of a Black woman who endured 32 years of wrongful imprisonment and walked out with her head held high. After 32 years behind bars, Mary Virginia Jones proved that dignity cannot be taken away. If her story moved you, support us by subscribing to Black Journey, where we share the untold stories of struggle, survival, and strength.